Kia ora, good evening. The condition of the two Chinese tourists that remain in hospital following a fatal accident near Lumsden yesterday is listed as stable. The accident occurred after a van carrying 10 people went off a bridge on Nokamai Road and into the Mataura River. 3 of the injured were airlifted from the scene, 1 to Dunedin Hospital for treatment and 2 to Southland Hospital, while 5 were conveyed by ambulance to the Southland facility. The driver died at the scene. Police are praising the rescue efforts of 3 anglers who heard the crash and entered the river to help the occupants out of the stricken vehicle prior to the arrival of emergency services. Unemployment has fallen to 6% according to the latest household labour force figures released today. There were 24,000 more people employed in the December 2013 quarter, following an additional 28,000 in the September quarter. Over the December 2013 year, the number of people employed rose 3% in the Household Labour Force Survey. Demand for workers from established businesses rose 1.9% over the quarter. Statistics Manager Diane Ramsey says the country is seeing strength across the labour market, particularly in the industries that provide services. The unemployment rate has been falling and employment rising for the last 18 months, now both at levels last seen in early 2009. World Wetlands Day was celebrated at several locations in the south today, including the Otatara property of Brian and Chris Rance, where they've created a man-made wetland from what was once a flat paddock. I spoke to environmental educator Mark Oster about the role of wetlands and their eco-importance.
Any wetland or area like this is suitable for restoration. It's getting the right plants in the right place and having a really good vision of what you want it for in the long term.
Traditionally, it hasn't always been looked on as favourable land in the past.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're growing and learning as the generations go by, and what we're seeing now is a real resurgence of realising the importance of wetlands, which, if you think in a human body, they're like the liver, and they purify what we put into it. So it's really important that they are looked after. They're a critical value and they do need our help. We put enough rubbish in them. They need our help to also keep their own health to be able to filter.
For those areas that have been in wetland and have been reclaimed for farming land, what sort of effects could be happening for the ecosystem in those areas?
I think that depends a lot on each wetland, but we can certainly see where wetlands become clogged with runoff and soil and nitrates that go into it, which can create a different ecosystem where some of the plant life either excels and grows so much that it blocks everything, or we see animal life that's not able to live there, macroinvertebrates which are in the water, which is totally necessary as part of the food chain. While water is a very important part of it, the forests and plants that are around them is also habitat for our native birds. And where we have restorations and we encourage more native birds to come in, we also then end up with the pests that come with them.
As far as pests go, how many are you dealing with here, and what are the options as far as taking control of them?
Yeah, in this particular area here and in most areas, most of all our pests are introduced. That's the good way to start with. If you think of every land mammal that you've ever seen in New Zealand, didn't come from here. The only native land mammals we had were 2 bats. So as we've brought in pests like stoats, ferrets, weasels, rats, cats, possums, they all will thrive in any of these habitats. Some animals actually prefer, the Norway rat, the water rat prefers these wet areas. Stoats will be around here. We've caught a nice big rat here this morning in one of the traps, and it's basically just a constant job of keeping up with trapping programs or pest control programs or poisoning programs that are targeted at the pest that we want to control.
And that's in order to make the bird life flourish?
That's in order to make the bird life flourish, and along with that everything else, because these pests don't just eat the bird life, they eat the invertebrates, the insects that are native, they eat our native lizards, and all these have a part to play in the wetland ecosystems.
The city's skateboarders and scooter riders will have to wait just a little longer before testing out the new skatepark on Alice Road. Work was due to commence on the new park last week, but delays in confirming engineering specifics and sourcing materials have meant that work is not expected to get underway until later this month. City Council Community Development Officer Mary Napper says that a bonus with the delay was that skaters had the opportunity to utilise the old facility right up until the end of the school holidays. The new skate park's expected to be completed at the end of May, early June. Research is debunking the myth that smokers suffer long-term weight gain after kicking the habit. Otago University have published research from the multidisciplinary health and development study, which followed progress of around 1,000 people born in 1972 to 3. Smoking habits and weight were measured at regular intervals from 15 to 28 years old. Around a third were smokers at 21, and by 38, around 40% had quit. Over the 17-year follow-up, the quitters' weight returned to the same level as people of similar age who had never smoked. Both men and women gained around 5 kilograms compared to people who carried on smoking. Stay with us. After the break, Labor nominees vying to stand as their party's nomination for the Invercargill seat. Welcome back. As South Today News reported on Friday, Labor has accepted a second nomination in the race to see who will stand for the party in the Invercargill seat. Michael Gibson has been in the region for 5 years and comes from a background in law and was electorate secretary for Dunedin North MP Pete Hodgson from 1996 to 2002. Mr Gibson spoke of his reason for seeking the nomination for the Invercargill electorate earlier today.
Well, I first began thinking about it, I suppose, subconsciously after David Cunliffe's election, because that whole process was a new thing for us in the Labor Party. It was the first time grassroots members like me had any say in the election of a parliamentary leader, and it was quite invigorating watching the candidates coming in and out. Of the three, Grant Robertson was the one I knew best. He's an old friend from university days and things. But I did vote for David Cunliffe because I thought he was the best person to lead the party and take on National this year. So that got me thinking, and a few other people. Then later on, when we heard that the nominations remained open, and Eric Roy deciding he was going to stand down, our conversations became a little more pointed, and that led to me deciding week before last that I was going to challenge Leslie and try and obtain the candidacy.
It's certainly good for us journalists out there to see competition, and it provides news, of course, but what is it good for the party locally?
Yes, I think it is, and most feedback we're getting seems to be pretty good. At least it draws a bit of attention to the party. People will know that there are different options out there, and I've got my views, Leslie's got hers, different experiences and skills. So yes, it does create a sense of competition. When I first moved down here, one of the first observations I made to people is that Invercargill feels like a Labor seat. To me, it seemed very similar to Dunedin South. I've since learned that it isn't. There are some differences, but still, it feels like this is a seat the Labor Party should have. And I don't believe it's unwinnable, or I wouldn't be standing, but what we're going to have to do is do a few things differently.
It's not turned into one of those seats where obviously a candidate puts up a really good fight, as Leslie Sopa did with Clutha South and of course against Bill English in previous elections, and gets the nod for a high place on the list. Invercargill hasn't turned into one of those seats?
No, I don't think it has. Labor lost a lot of the provincial seats, I think, in the 2005 election, and then its fortunes have declined and things. So we do need these seats back. We need the party votes here back if Labor's going to form a credible government.
Are you happy you could generate the resources to run an effective campaign?
I hope so.
Should you win the nomination?
Yes. Well, obviously we'll have to, and we've started preparing for that sort of thing now. It looks as though the election will be towards the end of the year. Quite how late, we don't know. But what we will have is our campaign team up and running. In fact, my nomination team, with a few additions, will be the campaign team. So what we're really doing is preparing now for the campaign.
Also contesting the nomination is former Labor List MP Leslie Sopa, who contested the Invercargill seat for Labor in 2008 and 2011. Hunter Andrews asked her for her reaction following the reopening of the nomination process.
Basically, the goalposts changed with a sitting MP announcing he was stepping down when he had firmly announced last year that he wasn't stepping down. So I was absolutely relaxed about giving the opportunity for anyone who is interested in a very important election year to have the chance to put themselves forward. The Labour Party is all about opportunity, as far as I was concerned. If there was someone out there who wanted to throw their name in the ring, then competition is a healthy thing.
I have to say, and I said to Michael that it is, it's good for a journalist such as myself with a political bent, but it also must be good for the party as well, because there's to have that activity around the nomination process.
It's a healthy process, as I say. Competition's a healthy thing. People, it sparks interest. People think about the issues. They think about who's got the experience and the profile, and who's been involved in the community the longest. And it just sparks interest. I think, as you say, you as a journalist think it's healthy, and it is.
How is the party mechanism down here, the state of play? There was obviously resurgence in memberships with the Cunliffe leadership. Will it be an interesting process?
There was a big increase in membership for Labour all around the country, and David Cunliffe has given the fairly significant figures of that. So yes, there were a lot of people joining Labour in late last year around the time of the leadership selection. That's brought a lot of new people into the Invercargill party. It's the other reason I was quite relaxed about the reopening of nominations, because we did have a lot of new members, or members who had renewed their membership after significant lapses and so forth. So it's healthy to give that opportunity for people to actually be involved in a process, a formal process, where they're considering a pretty important issue, choosing the candidate who's going to represent them.
Whatever the decision is, and of course that's up to the party, did you begin marshalling resources for this campaign? Because it looks like this year will be an election campaign, all year fairly much.
That will be very true, Hunter. There is no doubt at all that this is a big year. And yes, of course, you start early thinking about the process of the election. Obviously, as a previous parliamentarian and someone who's been very much involved in the political process, I had thought quite early on about 2014 as an election year. What were the likely times when the election might be called? What were the likely issues to be? We've got a lot of very big local issues.
And South Today News will also bring you coverage of the National Party's nomination process for the Invercargill seat as it unfolds in the coming weeks. And that is all from us this Wednesday. Stay with us on Sport, part one of our two-part interview with New Stags coach Brad Moore. We're back on Friday. From the news team, good night.